Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 333 or 333. That's actually kind of fun to say. I am cooking right now. The heat in our building is centrally controlled because of provincial laws that state that the heat must be turned on in all apartments by the end of September and that the temperature must be above 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. However, this system means that the heat is on regardless of the temperature outside. And right now the temperature outside is 22 degrees or 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And the result is that our apartment right now is really, really, really hot. And since my office/recording studio is the furthest from an open window in the apartment, you know what, listeners? I'm going to make this a not safe for work episode because I am not wearing a shirt right now, and I am also not wearing. I am also not wearing socks. If you're into that kind of thing, so let's move on to some more wholesome folks that are going to be on the episode. So first up is Niki.
Hello. And
a returning champion, Bob.
Howdy.
Just out of curiosity, do either of you live in an apartment building and ever need to deal with this kind of nonsense that, you know, things are out of your control because you don't own your place?
Thankfully, no. But I'm also very sensitive to the cold. So regardless of housing, heating, I'm probably always there's always probably going to be something that bothers me.
Once upon a time, I did, and we had the same issue. Actually, we wanted the heat on, but they wouldn't turn it on early enough for us, so we would just bundle up like late October.
The exact opposite of our problem. I've done something that is probably spectacularly stupid, but I have researched it, which is I have bought a ton of polyurethane tinfoil bubble wrap, and I have created basically slip covers for our baseboard water heaters. Which hopefully should save our butts this winter when the heat gets like jacked up to like, I don't know, 35 degrees, which I have no idea even what that would be in Fahrenheit, but it'd be hot. Apparently it's not a fire hazard because it's just the water heat can't get up that high enough to burn anything. So fingers crossed. Well, let's get talking about Pokemon here. So Pokemon Legends Z to A or Z to A, I guess, depending on whether you're Canadian, American, or French. Niki, you actually reviewed both the last mainline game, Scarlet and Violet, and you also reviewed the first Legends title. Generally speaking, I believe you enjoyed the Legends much more than you enjoyed the mainline title. I think you gave the Legends a 90 and you gave Scarlet and Violet a 70-something. Given that you've been playing all of these games for the last, you've been playing Pokemon for many, many years, but how would you define the differences in philosophy between the mainline series and the Legends series, now that the Legends series is actually a series?
Yeah. It seems kind of like Legends is about catching Pokemon a little more than the classic mainline series, which feels a little more like this all-rounded emphasis on catching as well as battling. With that in mind, though, Legends ZA does feel like it's trying to bridge that gap and be a little more like the classic mainline games than the first Legends Arceus game was.
Yeah, because I feel like Arceus was trying a lot of new things, if I recall. It was set in a very different period of Pokemon history. It was set in the far past, and the technology wasn't quite there yet, I guess you could say, both in terms of the technology in the Pokemon games and in terms of the system that it was on. Do you think that the Legend series might be the more promising direction for the future of Pokemon?
It's interesting because I have not progressed super far in ZA just yet, so my opinions might change the longer the game goes on. Under most circumstances, I would say yes to answer your question, primarily because there is something innately fun about exploring, discovering, and catching Pokemon. I feel like that is the thing that makes Pokemon really unique compared to other RPGs, which are like, yeah, you know, every RPG has battles. And in that regard, like Pokemon does its own thing, but does it do it better than other RPGs? Probably not. What makes Pokemon unique is catching the little guys. And because Legends has that focus on catching the little guys, it does feel like it can move in, like you say, like a more promising direction. That being said, ZA adds a lot of things from the classic mainline games back into the Legends formula that I kind of like at some times, and at other times I kind of wish they had just stuck with what Legends Arceus did.
One thing that I suspect that you and everyone playing this, at least everyone with a Switch 2 playing this, is thankful for that they're not moving back is that it's new hardware. I'm tired of making fun of the Switch, partially because it'd be like me making fun of the Nintendo NES after the Super Nintendo comes out. But honestly, we have a system now that can actually run games, which is cool. So I'm curious, you're playing it on Switch 2, or have there been any real noticeable improvements in performance or graphical fidelity as compared to the previous 2 games on the original Switch?
Yeah, the game runs. Knock on wood, I haven't had any frame drops.
The game runs. That's actually a step forward.
Right. Well, the thing that really got me, especially in the final Scarlet and Violet DLC, the Indigo Disc, they introduced new Pokemon. One of them was Archaludon, the evolution of Duraludon. And I really wanted to use it. And I'm like, well, of course, that's one of the new Pokemon. They want you to use it too, right? Every time I sent the Pokemon out, the game went literally to 0 frames per second. Every single time I used that Pokemon, I thought my game froze. Oh. That is concerning, to put it in a certain way.
Just a bit, yeah.
So the fact that I can actually send Pokemon out, run around, and the game isn't lagging is pretty huge. It's a shame that it took this long to get to that point, but it is a thing that is worth mentioning.
It's especially worth mentioning because, actually, from what I've read, I don't know, is this an open world game? I know it's, as opposed to Arceus, where it was set in, I actually don't, would it have been like the early 20th century, the equivalent of the early 20th century, or even the late 19th century?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as opposed to that, and it's very country-based, and you're in the country, and there's hills, and nature-based, this is solidly in an urban environment. Is it like an open-world urban environment?
Yeah. It's, I've been joking that this is like Yakuza Pokemon. You've got your Kamurocho, and here you go, right? You're going around Kamurocho, except it's Paris.
I would actually, I play a Yakuza game set in Paris. That'd be fun.
Yeah, exactly, right? And there's a organized crime syndicate that is very, very Yakuza coded in this game. So, we're getting there. We're moving slowly towards like a dragon type.
Oh, that's a terrible joke, and I love it so much.
We're getting there.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Let's. Can you give me a little bit of a heads up about the main objective of the story here? So clearly, you mentioned the focus is a little bit more on catching them than it is the traditional gym battle kind of thing that you would expect from a generic Pokemon game.
Yeah. In this one, they've also added this thing called the. Wow, the name is escaping me right now. It's the tournament. There's a tournament. It might be called the ZA tournament. You're going up in the ranks. You're starting at rank Z, and then basically in the daytime, it's wow, wonderful. You walk around Paris and you do things, and then at night, there's a battle zone that opens up, and as you battle people in the battle zone, you get points. Then when you get enough points, you can do a promotion match to go up the next rank in the alphabet. And the basic kind of plot line is if you reach rank A, you get a wish granted. So you're trying to get to rank A while also going around and stopping rogue mega evolved Pokemon that have mega evolved without a trainer. And you're trying to stop them because they're very powerful and large, and they will damage the city and hurt people if you don't stop.
Are we talking
them.
like kaiju large, like Godzilla large, or okay?
Yeah, no, they're big. Yeah, well, okay, maybe not kaiju large, but maybe like a little shorter than that. Yeah, there's this like underlying plot point of the Pokemon live in the city now, and they're being kind of sectioned off into these zones. But sometimes, well, first off, there are a lot of zones, so people are kind of being displaced from those areas around the city, but also sometimes Pokemon are escaping those zones and causing trouble. So there's this kind of underlying plot of why are these zones being made? Is there any way to kind of control this problem with the rogue mega evolutions? And also competing in this tournament to make your way up to rank A so you can further help the city not get in trouble, basically.
I imagine that the Pokemon have, I don't know, like, would there be like a water type near a fountain or a grass type near a park? Like, are they put into the areas where you would expect to find them?
So the interesting thing about that, and this is one of the things that has been really conflicting me about it, yes, in the regular areas, you would find like that, water types near a fountain, you see bird Pokemon in trees, and that kind of stuff I think is very nice. Flabebe is a Pokemon from the original X and Y games that always carries a flower with it. So when you go to like flower beds, you'll find Flabebe there. And that's very nice. But the wild zones, which is where wild Pokemon of a particular type are concentrated, they feel very detached. It's just like, here's one block that is sectioned off by like a barrier. You enter the barrier and then it's like, oh, here's all of the ground type Pokemon, and they're just kind of here. One in particular that I felt was very jarring was because these areas are added as you play the game. So it's like, oh, I remember when this place was just a block, and now it's sectioned off to wild zone, whatever number. And now there's a little bit of snow on the ground because this is where the ice types go. And it feels very disjointed from the city, even though it's supposed to be a part of it. And it's like, it makes sense because how else do you justify type diversity in a city? But it's also kind of like, it almost makes it feel like they're drip feeding you wild Pokemon as opposed to the traditional experience of exploring a new place and finding new Pokemon in that new place. So I feel very conflicted about that.
Yeah, it seems to me that, I mean, this is not the first time there has been an urban environment in a Pokemon game, but I think it's the first time there's been one that's been fully confined in this open world style. And it would have been interesting, and a lot of work clearly, to have created a bunch of new Pokemon that would be like specifically wild Pokemon as they would exist in the city, rather than trying to shoehorn wild Pokemon who exist in nature into the city.
Yeah, that was one thing that I had been kind of hoping for. Like you said, it would have been a lot of work. This is just like wishful thinking. But starting with Sun and Moon, they started doing regional variants, which are the same Pokemon, but like a different form to conform to their new environment. And they did that for Legends Arceus. There were Hisui and Sneasel, which are different from regular Sneasel. Hisuian Braviary is different from regular Braviary, and etc. I was kind of hoping that we would get not just Megas, but Colosian versions of certain older Pokemon that, like you said, they could fit into this urban environment a little more, but what they opted to do instead was only make new mega evolutions. So it's you do end up with this thing where it's like, yeah, why is there an Abomasnow in the middle of the city? Well, because this one block has all of a sudden just got snow and there's no snow anywhere else.
That's a little bit of a shame, but at the very least, I feel like I'm giving them an out here, but at the very least, they're trying something new. It just seems like they couldn't go to the level that would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we can talk about like what we wish they could have done, and for me, that would have been just give us like a few areas outside of the city. You enter as a tourist. The whole gimmick of this one is that you are visiting Kalos as a tourist. If you could have just taken that train to like a different place, maybe you could have gone to the snowy area there. Kalos has snowy routes. One of the big appeals of Kalos in X and Y is that you can experience all 4 seasons as you go around the region because they're all so different like that. But, they opted to do urban only, and they're working with what they have. But it still feels disjointed, even if that was their only option.
Earlier, you compared it to Kamurocho a little bit. I understand there's a bigger city than Kamurocho because Kamurocho is just like one district in a city. But the thing that's always impressed me about the Yakuza games is just how alive Kamurocho has felt, in all of them, as a matter of fact. It just feels like a real living place where people exist and live their lives and get in trouble, etc. I'm curious how the city feels in this game. Does it feel dynamic and alive? Like, does the day-night cycle change what you might expect? Does it feel different at night than during the day?
Yeah, they do take advantage of the day-night cycle, not only because of the implementation of the battle area, but also you find different Pokemon during the day versus during the night. Visually, it's very distinct. They have a lot of side quests. A lot of them do give kind of like a dragon vibes. I just finished one where it was the police officer was like, get me a Shuppet because Shuppet will be able to find people with negative emotions and maybe we can help them before crimes happen. And the Shuppet takes him to the wife and the wife is like, you haven't been home lately, so I don't feel good. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember playing that in a Like a Dragon game. I'd say the day-night cycle is quite nice in that, yeah, there's, diurnal and nocturnal Pokemon. But I think the way that Lumiose City feels dynamic and alive is that they have side quests, which they did have in Legends Arceus and did not have in Scarlet and Violet. And I think that was a very big point against Scarlet and Violet. I don't think Paldea felt as lived in as Hisui or Lumiose because you don't have these people who you're like interacting with and doing stuff with.
I imagine another way that it's different than Arceus. Like I said earlier, open world, very, very pastoral, I guess you could say, whereas this is urban. So is there much more, how can I put this? Is there much more vertical exploration in this game, like vertical spaces, maybe hidden areas like that? Because I imagine that a city is much more tightly packed than the open world of the hills and the valleys.
Yeah, they make a much bigger point of like Spider-Maning through the rooftops. Yeah. That is part of how they make Lumiose more expansive, is that you do climb to the tops of buildings and like there's different Pokemon at the tops of buildings. There are some people hanging out there. That is definitely a part of it.
So I suspect that there are some people who are listening who have really only played the mainline games. What's the biggest difference between how Pokemon battles are initiated and handled in the Legends series as opposed to the mainline?
Well, the thing that's really interesting is that in Legends Arceus, it was still turn-based. Um, and you would like select your move, and your Pokemon would do that move, and then depending on the speed comparison, your Pokemon might be able to move multiple times before the opponent. In this game, it's not quite the same way. Your Pokemon, you actually, moving around actually makes a difference because you can make your Pokemon dodge moves if you move them out of the way. And then as you select an attack, every attack has a cooldown. And depending on your Pokemon's speed, that cooldown may be faster or slower. And basically, you're just kind of using moves in a particular order in order to make the most of your time, basically. So even for those who are used to Legends Arceus, the battle system is quite different in this game because it is more real-time as opposed to turn-based like Legends Arceus was, and like the entire mainline series.
Okay, I think that I'm hoping that the audience forgives us this, because if you get you and me on a podcast together, we're probably going to talk about Like a Dragon. But is it at all similar to the difference between like the turn-based combat in Like a Dragon versus what it kind of became in Infinite Wealth, where there is positioning and there's a little bit more of a real-time aspect of it, where positioning really does matter and you can move around?
So in Like a Dragon 8, the positioning matters, but it's still turn-based. You can take however long you want to do an attack, and your opponent has to wait. They have to politely say, okay, Ichiban, take your time. Go through the menu however you like. In this game, not only does the positioning matter, but the opponent will just start using attacks. And you have to respond. If you don't select anything, the opponent will not wait for you. There is no like turn-based element anymore.
Okay, so it really is real-time combat. I like that. That's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I appreciate them playing around with that.
Like you said, the combat is different than Arceus. What gameplay mechanics were introduced in Arceus that are evolved or changed around here? Like how this is technically a sequel to a new series, and I'm curious how that series is advanced.
There are some things that we lost that I'm very sad that we lost, but in terms of the things that I think are evolved, I do think that real-time battle is kind of an evolution of the Legends Arceus gameplay, because in that one, even though it was turn-based, you could select your move to be either a power style or a speed style, and power style would be do more damage, but your Pokemon would lose speed, so the opponent could attack more times. If it was speed style, your Pokemon would lose damage output, but they would be able to attack more times in a row. And that feels like it kind of became the basis of the new battle style in Legends ZA, where it is entirely based on these cooldowns, with the Pokemon speed playing a role in, the overall cooldown time.
So I'm trying to resist making a battle is evolving joke, but I think that unfortunately one of the areas that has not, let's say, evolved is the presentation, because I've been reading a fair bit about this game and I've looked at this game, and while it is not an ugly game by any means, it does look like, well, it looks like Arceus. It looks like like a bunch of previous generations. It just runs better. I'm curious, what did you feel about the overall visual presentation and art direction of the city as itself?
I feel like it's charming. I mean, it definitely is not it's not a brilliant game in terms of its visuals, but I know that this is not an opinion a lot of people share, but to me, I value legibility a little more than like fidelity. I can appreciate that the clarity of it. I can tell when there's a Pokemon that I can catch. They brought back shiny Pokemon indicators from Legends Arceus. Thank Arceus itself for that. Items are clearly like, it's clear to see when there's an item. I felt like in Scarlet and Violet, those shimmering items on the ground were not always easily visible, but they're very clearly visible here. Things that you can interact with, like the ladders, are very clear. I appreciate that, even if it is quite behind in terms of graphical fidelity. And I mean, design-wise, I think everything is designed well. I think I've spent more time buying clothes for my character than I have spent battling the rogue mega Pokemon, because I like all of the clothes. I like how the characters are designed, even if they could have perhaps had better models under different circumstances.
When I look at this, I don't know. I have trouble imagining what a Pokemon game would look like with like incredible graphics, because when I picture Pokemon, generally speaking, I picture the original cartoon show, and the designs, I'm going to use the word simple, but I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It looks like Pokemon, and I feel like if they, I don't know, there is a subsection of fans, I imagine, who would want a Pokemon game to look exactly like Monster Hunter, like with that level of graphic fidelity in the world and everything. But I feel like if they went in that direction, it wouldn't look like a Pokemon game, and I feel like they'd probably get some complaints about it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, I liked it because that's what they were going for, and you could tell. But like, Detective Pikachu tries to do that kind of hyper realistic look for the Pokemon, and I think it works because that's what they were going for, where the Pokemon are literally alongside human actors. But I think you do bring up a fair point. They do care about keeping the visuals consistent with that, with the 2D art, that they attribute a lot to Ken Sugimori, but there were other artists as well. I'm sorry, I can't remember their names off the top of my head. Maybe like Atsuko Nishida could be one of them, but that kind of, like you said, it is simple, and that's not a bad thing. It's very manga inspired, and there is a lot of simplification that goes into that style, but that also makes it very clean and pristine, and it has that distinct look that I don't think Game Freak wants to move away from. I think they want it to look like that. They want to stick to that classic, like those roots that they have with that particular art style.
I think you're absolutely right. Also, I did not dislike Detective Pikachu. I really liked it. I thought it was fun.
I love that movie.
It was utterly ridiculous, but in a great way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of that, is like, well, that's why I don't mind how the Pokemon look in there. But for a mainline Pokemon game, I don't quite know if I would want that.
Well, it would be a hell of an evolution, but not necessarily a direction that I think that is a good way. I guess we'll find out at some point, I would imagine. At some point, somebody's got to take a chance and push this thing forward, but we'll see. There are two more aspects of this game that I wanted to ask you about. The first was, you mentioned early on that some of the emphasis of the Legend series is catching Pokemon. How does the catch system work here?
Oh man, I feel a bit bad saying this, but it's like the Legends Arceus catching system, but with less. It's like streamlined, but I don't think in the best way. I really loved in Legends Arceus how you could throw berries and other food to distract Pokemon. You could toss like traps. You could put up smoke screens. But in this game, the only thing you can do is throw the Pokeball or battle them. You can sneak up on them if you're hiding in the bushes, but you cannot actually distract them with items or set up any traps like you could before. And I think that's a shame, because I think that was part of the fun, is you're catching Pokemon in a way that you couldn't do in the mainline series. But now you're back to either you throw the Pokeball and catch them the first try, or you have to battle them, which is really no different from the traditional main series, except now they're on the overworld. And it feels like it's a bit of a shame. Like, if you're telling me that you're going to have these wild zones completely separated from the rest of the city, while still being in the city and taking up space in the city, why can't I interact with the Pokemon in more ways like we could in Legends Arceus? I wish they had retained that. Because as fun as it is, I'm not like excited to catch Pokemon the same way I was in Legends Arceus, because it's like either I catch them with that first Pokeball or I battle them. That doesn't seem very different to me than Scarlet and Violet, Sun and Moon, all of the other ones.
And it's a real shame, because they actually do have a phenomenal prototype for how this kind of thing could work, especially in an urban environment in New Pokemon Snap, where you have to change the environment somewhat to be able to get the shot. It could have been interesting if, I don't know, if there was various things like, I have not played the game, I don't know, but if there's like a Pokemon sitting on a fire escape, for example, and you threw like a rock at the fire escape to scare the Pokemon so it could get down to a level where you could capture it, like some environmental puzzles to be able to catch some interesting Pokemon would have been, I don't know, feel maybe more engaging and maybe liven up the world a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a wonderful idea, because it's true. The environment is, I think, almost as important as the Pokemon themselves. And while, I mean, I do like Lumiose City, it really does feel like I'm not interacting with it in any way. And I think that's a shame, because there is fun to be had with an urban environment. Not everything needs to be the great wilderness, but the fact that they removed those interaction methods that they had in Legends Arceus makes it feel a little less engaging. So that was kind of like why I was a little apprehensive with the comparison. Yeah, I feel like Legends was setting itself up to be about catching Pokemon first and foremost, but Legends ZA almost feels like it's trying to be more like the traditional mainline games and less like Legends Arceus. And I can't say that I am thrilled about that as of yet. Maybe my mind will change as I play more, but as of now, I am a little less pleased with this decision to move Legends closer to the mainline series.
Yeah, it really does make you ask the question, why bother with the Legends then? Like, if it's going to be this close, why did you bother spinning it off into this new series that has some different mechanics and some experimental gameplay?
Yeah, exactly. I hope it is not just like the technical, like to be pedantic. Oh, well, it's set in an old region, not a new one, so we have to call it Legends so people aren't confused about it being a new game in a new region. I hope it's not that. Because if they made, like, hypothetically, a Legends game that was exactly like the mainline series, but in an old region, and they're like, we call it Legends because it's in an older region, I would feel pretty let down, I think, even if it was a great game.
Well, I suppose that the big innovation in this game then would be the large-scale Pokemon battles. Without, I know you're still earlier in the game, but without spoiling a specific encounter, can you tell me a little bit about how the flow of this fight works?
Do you mean the rogue megas, or do you mean megas? Just battles in general? Oh, see, those are interesting, actually. I think those are kind of fun. They are like, these, actually, I'm glad you brought it up. These are like an evolution of the noble Pokemon battles in Legends Arceus. And I think these are are well executed. So you've got a big Pokemon that's attacking you, and you don't want to die. So you have to dodge the Pokemon's attacks while also having your Pokemon attack it, so you can subdue it. And they will do all sorts of raid-like things. They'll charge you. They'll drop explodey things. They'll rain thunder on you, and you have to like maneuver around the area without stepping on the thunder. They might bring in some baby Pokemon to attack you. They might charge up and attack, and you have to attack them a certain number of times so they stop their attack. They do all sorts of raid-like actions like that. And I've been enjoying that because it really puts the emphasis on you maneuvering the field while also determining when is the best time to attack, so the Mega Pokemon doesn't just like punch me, right? And I've been having fun with that. I'm
glad they at least advanced some of the gameplay from Legends Arceus, because I was getting worried for a moment there. Because it really did sound just kind of like a regular old Pokemon game just shoved into an urban center. Okay, without getting to spoilers, and I appreciate the fact that you're still early, I'm just curious, what are you enjoying the most given where you are in the game right now?
I don't want to say character customization because that might make it sound like the rest of the game is not good, but I do want to give a shout out. I love the character customization, so that's fun.
Niki, do you have any idea how much time I spent dressing my hostesses in Yakuza 0? Like, it's fine. Do not worry about it. No judgment here.
I mean, that's the thing is, I will say, I think I'm very grateful that the character customization is so good, because then you do feel compelled to battle every night so you can get more money so you can spend them on your $100,000 shoes.
Well, that's capitalism right there.
Yes. But no, it's the character customization is great. And again, I think that ties back into the character design being so strong. Even though there are these elements of the game that feel disappointing to me, I am having fun kind of wandering around, fulfilling the tasks that are placed before me, kind of unraveling this mystery behind the wild zones and all this stuff. And in that regard, I mean, I do think it is fun. Even if there are elements that I'm like, I wish this was different, but it is fun. And I appreciate exploring an urban environment where you can just find Pokemon in trees and on rooftops and, just throw a Pokeball at them and hope for the best. And then, taking them into battle. I do like that this new real-time battle system not only makes you think about your Pokemon's movesets in a different way, but it kind of recontextualizes these old moves that I think before used to be considered very pointless. Like moves like Fire Spin in previous generations. In Gen 1, well, Gen 1 is broken in its own way, and those, moves were OP because they didn't let the opponent attack. But once they actually balanced them, people thought they were kind of pointless because they do too little damage, and the trade-off that they can't switch out is not very valuable. But now, in this game, they actually place the fire on the ground, and the opponent has to walk around them. Otherwise, their Pokemon get stuck, and they can't reach the opponent's Pokemon to attack. So now you have this interesting spatial element that plays a role. I normally don't put, like, spikes and toxic spikes on my Pokemon for the mainline battles because that's more of a competitive strategic move. But now, if you use spikes, the opponent can't get close to you or they're going to hurt themselves. It really is fun to see these old moves recontextualize with the spatial awareness and the environment elements that they can incorporate.
I mean, it's unfortunate that they didn't advance it in the ways that we were talking about earlier, but in terms of advancing the formula of Pokemon, it seems like that is where they could find a lot of gold in the future. That is really, really cool.
Yes, absolutely. I think if they figured out a way to make the player move separately from the Pokemon, I think that could be a real game changer.
Well, I really want to thank you for playing it now. I mean, obviously you're enjoying it. I'm really, really glad you're enjoying it because I really know you were looking forward to it.
Well, thank you very much.
And I really look forward to reading your review when you're done. And of course, that review will be on rpgfan.com. All right, we're going to move from catch 'em all to beat 'em up now. And we're going to be talking about a game called Absolum. So, Bob, you recently reviewed this. I'm just going to give people a little bit of background. I mean, if you're a fan of video games, you probably know there's been a significant resurgence of an incredibly popular arcade genre in the last decade or so, which is the side-scrolling beat-em-up. I used to adore this genre. It included such classics like Double Dragon for the NES, Final Fight for Capcom. I had Final Fight 2 for SNES, and I played the crap out of that. There's Streets of Rage by Sega, and probably everyone of a certain age out there knows all of the arcade hits from Konami that included The Simpsons, X-Men, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, and many, many others. And of course, this genre eventually evolved into my beloved Yakuza series, into 3D beat-em-ups. But 2D side-scrolling beat-em-ups never really died out. And as I said, in the last decade, there have been a few big ones that have been released. One of the most famous being Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, which a few years ago got a complete edition. If you've ever played that, like on Xbox in the early 2010s and you miss it, or actually probably even earlier than that, it's out now. And River City Girls 1 and 2. And one of the most prolific publishers of the recent beat-em-up genre is Dotemu, I think. They're a French video game developer and publisher. And recently they've been publishing original sequels to like Streets of Rage 4, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge, it picks up basically exactly where Turtles in Time left off. I think they're also publishing Marvel Cosmic Invasion in a few months, which looks so good. But their latest beat-em-up title is called Absolum, which is a beat-em-up that not only includes roguelike elements, but also, a healthy helping of RPGs. So, Bob, to start with, what is your experience with the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre?
Well, like you, I grew up with the classics on NES. Double Dragon, for instance, River City Ransom, one of my absolute favorites of all time.
Yeah, River City Girls is a spin-off of River City Ransom.
Of course. Streets of Rage, obviously. And, one of my favorites actually around 2010, 2009 was a Korean online beat 'em up, Dungeon Fighter Online, which kind of became something I didn't love. But at the time, it was an MMO beat 'em up, which was phenomenal. It had PvP combat and you could run around with friends and beat 'em up.
Really good idea.
It was so much fun. Yeah, no. And it's still around, but it's a lot different from what it used to be. But Absolum, with the beat 'em up genre, it's one of those genres where if you've played one beat 'em up, you've played them all. Like in essence, where you're walking around this 2.5D landscape and you're timing hits and avoiding attacks and jumping up and throwing, and the bare essentials are here with Absolum. So if you're at all into that genre, this is going to be an easy grab for you just based on that.
Yeah, Look, I'm not going to lie. There has not been a tremendous amount of innovation in this genre for the last, many, many, many years. And the biggest innovations of the genre, I would argue, have been the addition of RPG mechanics. Amanda and I started playing Scott Pilgrim vs. the World when we were at the cottage, which I've never played before because I didn't have an Xbox. And I love Scott Pilgrim games.
So
I love Scott Pilgrim games. And the addition of the RPG mechanics into it are really fascinating because there are stats, there's an inventory system, unlocking moves, levels, like experience points. Like it has all of these elements of RPGs, and it really did, for me, liven up this whole genre.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the route you need to go with a genre like this, unless you completely warp its base mechanics. And that's roguelite more than anything else at the end of the day, because it's one of those things where you're meant to die, you're not going to get to the final boss, and then when you die, you use some currencies you've accrued over the course of a run, and then level up your moveset, and you can level up stats on a skill tree, and you can buy equipment that you've discovered to bring into the next run. These are all classic roguelike elements that blend into the RPG genre.
Yeah, those two genres do. There tends to be a lot of crossover, and it does seem to merge surprisingly well with the beat 'em up genre. Out of curiosity, I mean, I think my favorite is absolutely Hades, like most people, in terms of for me, the important thing is that there needs to be a good central conceit as to why you are returning to your home base after every failed run. And in Hades, it was literally you're in hell, you die, and you just respawn again because you're in hell already. What's the conceit here?
There's not a huge story element. You've got this earth goddess that brings you back to try to help overthrow Azra, who's this tyrannical ruler who has decided that wizards are evil and they brought about the apocalypse, and they kind of did. So it's one of those things where you're a scapegoat, and all because you're a wizard, good or bad, he's trying to crush all of you to maintain his rule. So it's just beating your head up against the wall, respawning, leveling up until you are eventually able to topple Azra.
Yeah, always nice when the villain actually has a point. In a roguelike, I guess the difference between a roguelike and a roguelite is roguelites, you respawn beginning of the game with knowledge, whereas with a roguelike, you do get a element of character progression where you unlock new skills, and those are permanent, although you always need to restart at the beginning. What is the process of character improvement in Absolum so you can, I guess, become a powerhouse as the game continues?
So you get gems or jewels or something across a run, which is an ever-flowing stack currency that you can use to increase stats. Also, depending on how you perform in a run, which is diversifying your moveset to take out enemies, having high combos without getting hit, things like that will increase a score. And when you have a really high score, you come back and the Earth Goddess will give you two different kinds of currency as your player profile levels up. And you can use those to unlock new moves and to essentially just make yourself have more customizable traits across the 4 different characters you can play as. The gems are more about getting some passive buffs like increased impact damage, which is how hard an enemy is hit when you throw them, or longer stamina when riding a mount. So instead of the mount leaving you when you've only done a few hits, you get a few more hits out of riding a mount, which to me, I have qualms with this in a lot of games I review, where the passive buffs, the percent increases of some damage or something like that is not that interesting. They spice it up here because you've got choices. So you don't have to level up everything to get better and better abilities. You can pick and choose, okay, I want to invest in this style of combat because this is how I like to play, and then forego these other upgrades. And that way you can get to things like a revive buff. When you die, you don't just die, you can come back with a certain percentage of your health. So they try to make the passive buff level progression more interesting in Absolum, which I appreciate. But it's almost like a pet peeve of mine when it's just like, okay, you get more damage, which is basically forecasting you're not meant to beat this game in one run. I mean, theoretically you could.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody on YouTube is doing a speed run of this right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is a speedrunner's dream. If you know the attack, you know exactly how to counter, you know how to time your counter attacks, you could probably get through this game at level 1.
Yeah. Again, I've seen speedruns of, for example, again, Hades, and it's like, oh, good God, how are you doing this? This is impossible, but they do. Okay. So I would like to talk a little bit more about because this is, an RPG site. Let's talk a little bit more about the RPG mechanics in the game. So out of curiosity, you mentioned in your review side quests, which is a classic RPG staple, but are there other ones? How do the RPG mechanics work here?
Well, a lot of it's the stat growth. And when you complete quests, you unlock new opportunities for new kinds of skills you can learn. So every time you beat a screen, basically, not really a stage, but a screen, you'll get a reward. And sometimes that reward is a buff of a certain element. By leveling up your character, you get access to new buffs per a skill tree. So you spend your currency, and if you're really into fire and you want to buff your fire skills, then you have the option of picking more fire skills than you would a lightning skill. And sometimes there's like a bubble mechanic. And if you really like putting enemies in bubbles, which is like a disable, you can level that up. And the levels and the opportunities for your skills to do different and interesting things is a pleasure, because it's not as simple as like, oh, your bubble now deals more damage, or they're delayed for a longer period of time. They can now explode when the bubble pops and hit all enemies around them. And that could be a buff that you get across your journey. All because you unlock it in town does not necessarily mean that you're going to see it and run. It just gives you the opportunity of potentially seeing it. So when you complete these quests, you get the opportunities to level up more elements. You get access to more options, basically, which is one of the things that makes Absolum so much fun, is because it's not just a stat growth that you get across runs. It's the ability to play the way you want to play. And if you like leaning into freezing enemies in the moment, you can level up that skill tree. It's kind of a late game perk, and you got to find the right side quest to unlock that. But once you get it, you could just lean all of your resources into that.
When you complete a run, when you die, and you go back to your home base, what is the home base like?
So it's a hub, basically. You got this hub world, and you can walk around and talk to different NPCs. And the NPCs will sometimes just talk about the world. And that's kind of how they build the world up. They're like, oh, I remember before the apocalypse happened, the different races used to live in harmony, and I miss those days, and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I miss the days before the apocalypse, too.
A little on the nose. Yes. So the NPCs will do some world building just by talking to you, which can feel a little bit like exposition. At the same time, they have slight personalities that do differentiate them from all the other characters. And one of the things that makes dying more palatable is not just like, okay, I just got to start over again. Everyone's got new things to say. And the developers do an exceptional job of slowly, little by little, peppering in new opportunities. So sometimes when you talk to them, say, hey, I need some new tools. When I get some new tools, I can give you some new skills. And then you have to go into the world and then choose a path where you think the tools are going to be, so that you can retrieve them. So instead of you going into a run just trying to get to the end and beat Azra, you will go into the world and try to find a different path. And there are branching paths, which is an absolute pleasure in this game. But sometimes just finding the tools can be a little difficult, because it's not always obvious where the forking paths are. They could be hidden behind the foreground. And if you're pushing up against the wall, you'd be like, oh, there's something back here. And then the foreground will disappear and you find your new path. So talking to different people in town will give you quests that will help you help them, and then they can help you. And it's not just story progression, but it's also like an impetus to go back in. It makes each run more interesting. And after about 10 or so hours, when I finally beat the game, the surprises tended to get less frequent. And when they were less frequent, that's when the game started to lose its luster. Not that it was dull or boring, but I felt like I was doing the same thing every single run until I got the right moveset or found the right secret to be able to get to the end more easily than I was in previous runs. So it can feel a little bit like you're beating your head up against the wall at a certain point, but for those first 10 hours, they do an exceptional job of keeping things fresh.
It sounds like they've managed to, for at least 10 hours, beat the main problem with beat 'em up games, which it really is just bang your head against the wall, right? You just beat up the enemies, you get to the end of the level. In many ways, like the traditional side-scrolling beat 'em up is basically almost an auto-scroller. Like you beat the guys, you like individual screen, then move forward, next individual screen, move forward, next individual screen. You can never go back. Here it sounds like the forking routes, and you mentioned secret walls, really does give levels a little bit more, I guess, non-linearity.
Yeah, and initially that's interesting and it's fun, and you can pull up a map and you see all these different routes, and just looking at the map when you've got all these routes unlocked can be cool. It's like, oh wow, look at all the different places I discovered. But it's one of those things where you got some soft walls where, yeah, you could go anywhere you want, but why would you go the hard route when you could go the easy route? And I don't know if one route's objectively harder than another. It might just be based on play style or the character you're using or maybe some skills that you're able to pick up. But eventually I devolved into going the easiest route for me every single run. So instead of actually having multiple routes, it felt like I had one route, because why would I go into the human knight encampment where all the enemies have shields and they have ranged attacks and it's very annoying to fight them, when I could just go the beast route and just beat up on some frogs and lizards and stuff and get to the end more easily without losing resources or health, and being able to save up some more money for those more expensive items later on.
Yeah, you also mentioned that you can not just avoid like those kind of enemies, and to be frank, everyone, there is nobody who likes enemies with shields in these games. They're really annoying, but you can also decide to avoid bosses specifically and avoid certain routes as well because of this, the forking paths.
Yeah, no, and that's the same idea basically. Like an easy route to a boss might be tantalizing, but if the boss at the end of that easy route is a boss that you're just going to lose a life to, then you might just try to figure out how to navigate the harder route so you can get to the easier boss, and vice versa. So again, it might be more player focused. For me, I see no reason why you'd want to beat yourself up against some shields, because like you said, in games like this, getting behind these enemies when there's multiple enemies on the screen, it's not a fun prospect.
Oh, they're so annoying. They're so annoying. It doesn't matter what beat 'em up they are. They're so annoying.
Yes.
I'm going to keep recalling back to Scott Pilgrim because it's the most recent beat 'em up I played / am playing. But one of the coolest things about Scott Pilgrim is there are tons of playable characters. How many are there here?
There are 4. You start out with 2, and then through quests, you unlock the other 2. And they're kind of your standard fare at first. You know, you got the one with a large melee, it gives you some reach, and you got the close-up melee guy who can, you know, take some punishment and hit enemies really hard. Part of what makes Absolum so interesting, though, is the different sorts of special abilities that they have. So there's a weak attack and a heavy attack, and then you have a special attack where you can unlock new abilities after accruing a certain amount of mana over time, remembering that you're wizards. So you hit enemies enough, your mana gauge increases, and then you can use some special ability to try and make the fight easier for you. The 2 unlockable characters really change up the melee combat, because one uses like a hook arm and does a lot more aerial combat, which can be a lot of fun for players. And my personal favorite is the second unlockable character, Brome, who is a frog wizard, which of course they're all wizards, but he's the most wizardy of all the characters. He's a floating frog with a wand, and he shoots projectiles out of that wand and has lots of explosive, bright attacks. So he's a visual marvel. And also if you're not the kind of person who wants to do a lot of melee combat, you want to fight from a distance, he's good at that as well.
Yeah, I am a giant fan of all frogs that want to fight against fascism. So good for them.
That's what's happening here.
Yeah, I've noticed. I read the news.
And the characters all have their own personal quests too. So there are certain quests you can only complete with certain characters, which gives them a little bit more personality. They've all got their own plots or desires in the world. And if you try and complete a quest with a different character, you're just not going to have the quest option later on. Which can get in the way a little bit if you're playing multiplayer with some randos online and you've got different story progression, because the way they handle that in this game is they default to the player with the least amount of story progression so that they don't hit spoilers or it doesn't get this awkward story gap where they're able to access something that they haven't unlocked yet.
That's relatively clever, actually. That seems like a really good way to handle that.
It is a good system. Unfortunately, the player with more progression might just be in it for the points or gems to unlock some new stats and abilities, and less for the story unlocking potential. But if you don't have someone to play with in the moment, it's nice to be able to just hit matchmaking and just get someone within a few seconds. Which
is pretty cool. Is there any character that is like your favorite to play, or do you kind of adapt to all of them across the board?
I really leaned into the dwarf, who has a shotgun and does a lot of close range attacks, and Brome, the frog wizard. He was my absolute favorite. So either the one that's super melee or the one that's super range. Those were the 2 characters I liked the most. For some reason, I like the idea. He doesn't have any magic power. He just has a shotgun and demands that everyone calls him a wizard. I don't know why that would make... I'm a wizard. It's true, though.
Okay, I'm looking at the screenshots here, and while the mechanics are interesting, and certainly the RPG mechanics that they've put into it are fascinating, my God, this game looks pretty. Beautiful,
It's
hand-drawn,
beautiful.
hand-drawn art, backgrounds, everything. It's just a gorgeous-looking game.
Yeah, the artistic design also keeps runs fresh. I think for a lot of folks, I don't care about graphics. I just need good gameplay. And to an extent, that's true. But what can certainly help is when it's nice to look at. And that includes abilities. They do an excellent job with the lighting here, where you've got like some dull, muted backgrounds, and then an enemy uses a bright fire attack, and it just lights up the entire room. And it's just fun and interesting. And that alone can give attacks the impression of strength or power, rather than sound effects or a delayed knockback when you hit them, give them that little punch oomph. So even if the gameplay is getting a little bit dull, the backgrounds and foregrounds are always a pleasure.
Yeah, and the animations, I'm just watching some footage of it right now. Just gorgeous, smooth. I think one of the things I really like about this, aside from the fact it is gorgeous by itself, so many beat 'em up games nowadays they default to, pixel art, essentially. And the pixel art is gorgeous, like the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game or the upcoming Marvel game, like gorgeous pixel art that is reminiscent of arcade classics, but still pixel art. Whereas this is beautiful, beautiful animation, and it's gorgeous. And I think just looking at it, I think it's a nice change of pace.
I really try to support developers that are being leaders rather than, lazily trying to piggyback off of prior successes. There are developers that are willing to take some risks. And if you're doing something different with the genre, you're going to get some bonus points in my book, just because, the same old can work because it's worked before. Why wouldn't it work again? Obviously there's something there and people are going to enjoy it, but
nostalgia sells.
Yeah. Nostalgia sells, and it's comfortable and it's easy. And, I imagine investors like that because it's more of a guaranteed success. But if you're able to do something new, like create a Dark Souls open world and it works phenomenally well, then, major kudos to you. Because I think just from like a consumer standpoint, or like if you're philosophically into game design and the industry from that perspective, expanding what can be successful emboldens other people to take chances as well. And that's good for all of us.
I completely agree. Another place that you don't want to take any chances when you're doing a beat 'em up is the sound design, because I would say it's more so than the graphics. I think one of the most important parts of a beat 'em up is that it sounds real good when you hit an enemy. It needs a good thump. Just a bunch of different sounds. So how is that going here? Lots of good impact sounds.
Yeah, lots of good impact sounds. The shotguns sound good. The lasers sound good. The fire sounds good. And it's all perfectly timed with the hits. So, that's something people don't think about a lot. It's one of those things where if it's broken, you notice it. But if it works well, you don't notice it. But the timing of everything it just has a satisfying impact. You press button, thing happens. It's not just visually, but it's also auditorily. So everything you do feels like it has purpose rather than just like hitting a brick wall or punching a pillow. Everything here feels like every time I hit an enemy, they're going to react and it's going to feel good. And when I get hit, it feels like I'm getting hit. So it's this nice back and forth dance where, you urgently want to hit them, not just to progress, but because it feels good. It gives you like this little power fantasy of like, I'm hitting an enemy up against the wall. They fly back at me because they're bouncing off the wall, and I hit them again, and you're juggling them up against the wall. And it's just got this nice adrenaline aspect to it that just keeps the game addictive.
Along with the sound design of that was a terrible one. That's a better one. Or let me try it against my body. There we go. Aside from those kind of things, how's the music?
Music's great. I mean, everything sounds like it should. If you're in a boss battle, the boss music is adrenaline infused, and it's got this dramatic flair to it. Whereas most of the game, because you're kind of like rebels fighting up against the suppression from this totalitarian leader, you got these sorrowful ballads because life isn't good for your encampment and the people you're fighting for and wizards and all that. So they do a nice job with the percussion and the horns and the strings. It's got this orchestral quality to it. And going back to what you said before about everything's pixel art in beat 'em ups, because that seems to be synonymous with the genre. There's no bleeps or bloops here. It has like this higher artistic quality to it that I absolutely appreciate.
Yeah, this does not appear to be a retro game. It's arguably a retro genre, but everything about it speaks to, a modern game.
Yeah. I agree. And yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to make sure I touched on is I worry that the genre limits itself just by being what it is. It's kind of like 2D platformers or 2D Metroidvanias, where the genre just limits itself based on what its core design is. There's not enough dimensions to it. And Absolum does a fantastic job of adding some newness to the genre, and it definitely pushes the genre forward. But the reason I gave it an 82 when really I think it's one of the best beat 'em ups out there is because the genre just limits itself. Someone really needs to break this genre open and do something really off the wall strange for this to reach into the 90s from my perspective. I mean, this game's well reviewed by other outlets because it is maybe the best beat 'em up made today.
It's a real good game, clearly.
Yeah, but the genre just is limiting compared to other genres where, like an open world RPG, you could do so many different interesting things in an open world RPG. The sky's the limit. Beat 'em ups, it's a little restrictive.
Arguably, the original Yakuza for the PlayStation 2 was a innovative take on the beat 'em up genre. Because while it wasn't 3D as in future Yakuza games, it did have and had an almost fixed perspective. It did build on the mechanics that were found in Final Fight Streets of Rage, to the point where a few years ago they released, as a bonus, they released a Streets of Rage or a Yakuza skin for the first level of Streets of Rage, where you get to play as Majima or Kiryu, which was awesome, and really did make me want like a 2D Yakuza side scroller. And do you think that might be a way to go with this? Like, that was clearly how the Yakuza series advanced it, by adding in so many different styles of gameplay and more story elements. But I don't know. Do you think that would work with a 2D game, or do you think they've really got to go in a completely different direction?
I mean, it certainly couldn't hurt. I think the more gameplay adjustments you can make, the more interesting it's going to be. That's going to be more work for the game designers. Obviously, you're going to have to figure out, okay, how do we introduce a gambling minigame? How do we introduce a cabaret into this game? You know, all these different things that the Yakuza series is known for. Like, I think when a lot of people think Yakuza, they don't even necessarily think of the beat 'em up aspect of it. They think of like all the different minigames. It's like an explosion of minigames. And I love the idea of varying up gameplay just to, you know, change up the repetition of hitting enemies in the face, which is always a pleasure in Yakuza. But, you know, it's nice to be able to take a break and then maybe invest in a business and then figure out how to corner this market of the world. And the big element here, which I touched on initially, was it can enhance the world building, because it's not just you hit enemy dies. It's, there's an entire market in this world where the merchants are trying to expand business, and maybe you have the opportunity to help the merchant expand business. Or maybe there's a whole crafting system where you can help someone invent new weaponry. Or maybe there's a character that's off to the side who's trying to start a dating service. And then you have to find people out in the world in this different route in the pond or in the skeleton area where, you know, you can help them do this matchmaking system. Things like that might blur into silliness, but depending on the game you're creating, is it super serious or not, you can have some fun with it and increase the storytelling just through gameplay mechanics. So I think Yakuza excels in this, and I think you really hit the nail on the head. I think that could really improve this genre. I
mean, it's where it took it when it hit the 3D era, and this is just kind of how it goes with any genre. It's like sometimes they move forward and sometimes they stay still. Like, let's take the Mario games, for example. Like, clearly there was a tremendous amount of innovation between Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers World. And then they took it into the third dimension. And then there started being a massive amount of innovation there. And the 2D Mario games, the few that were coming out at that time, were very, very limited. And like, they didn't really advance it. The closest thing was New Super Mario Brothers, which had wall jumping. That was the big innovation there. And don't get me wrong, I like the new Super Mario Brother games, but it seems like sometimes I worry that certain genres really have hit the ceiling, and I'm a little worried that might be the case with beat 'em ups, at least 2D style beat 'em ups.
Yeah. I mean, I had this thought earlier. I'm thinking, okay, so I'm criticizing this game for being limited by genre. What good ideas do I have? And it's things like maybe you climb a wall And instead of it being 2.5D horizontally, maybe it becomes vertically. I mean, you think a lot of these old beat 'em ups where instead of just walking around hitting enemies, now you're on a jet ski, and now you're like walking around this auto-scrolling jet ski and hitting enemies. That's changing up the gameplay. So if you did something like that in a game like this, where all of a sudden we're navigating the environment in ways that kind of bend the way you see the environment rather than just a long hallway, I think that alone can really expand the genre. But I had the same thought when I was playing Hollow Knight, where, I'm playing Hollow Knight and I'm enjoying it, but I kind of wish it wasn't a 2D game, just because there's so much depth to the game. I want to explore the world more broadly rather than just navigate a hallway and maybe jump up a platform and get some verticality. The camera basically is what's limiting this genre.
Yeah, I think that might be the case as well. But I do think that introducing certainly the roguelike mechanics and certainly the RPG mechanics were ways to liven things up a little bit and make it just so it wasn't just walk right. And it sounds like this game is actually attempting to do some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that, it might be one of the better examples of the genre and it's trying some new things. Maybe there's some life still there aside from just the nostalgia. Because honestly, I mean, the nostalgia's great. It is. I'm enjoying the hell out of Scott Pilgrim. But at the same time, it's like, this really hasn't advanced that far.
So then the answer becomes just keep putting new content in. Because like one of the best things about Absolum is whether you're conscious of it or not, every time you die, there's new dialogue in town in your hub world, and there's new opportunities for new quests, and they pepper them out. They don't just hit you with all of it in the beginning, and then you can breeze through it within a couple hours. They gently sprinkle it throughout each run, and you unlock new abilities gradually. So the pacing of the new content over a run is expertly done here. And they were able to keep it up for 10 hours. After 10 hours, they stopped doing it as much or as quickly as they were before. And then that's when it starts to get a little bit dull. So in a genre like this, I think if you want to keep things fresh, you're just going to have to keep introducing new content if you're not going to introduce new mechanics. And I think new mechanics or these mini games that we talked about before are a great way to do it. And Absolum, I'm not criticizing it too much here. I mean, again, I gave it a very favorable review, but if you want to hit the 90s, you're going to have to do something like Yakuza.
Yeah. Well, video games, it's not the only place where adding new elements can revitalize a genre. Sometimes with things like, I don't know, a store, you have to add new things to it every now and then to revitalize interest. And in the case of our store, we have. That was a torturous transition, but I'm going to go with it for this one. Thank you, Bob, for playing through Absolum for us. And I'm really, really glad you enjoyed it.
No, it's always a pleasure to see something new hit in the genre. And hopefully, this developer, I mean, they've earned their stripes. They can take it even further.
Yeah, and they are. I mean, Marvel Cosmic Invasion looks real, real good. As someone who spent a lot of quarters in an arcade when he was a kid, it looks real good. Anyway, so like I was saying about the store, we have some new stuff in there, including shorts, which is great for the time of year. Actually, you know what? I kind of wish that I had ordered a pair of shorts from the site right now because I am so hot. Oh my god, I would be very happy just wearing shorts in my not safe for work office at the moment. But if you are curious and you are feeling hot and you want a pair of shorts for the fall, you can find them at www.rpgfan.com/shop. And you can also find our collaboration with Hyperplay RPG at that link. It's the RPG Fan Review Card Collection. And that is a showcase of nearly 300 of our review cards, as you can see on Instagram or other social media channels. Another way to support us here at RPG Fan is to check out our other podcasts. And this one, for that matter. You're listening to this episode. Maybe you didn't listen to the last one, but you should, because we talked about Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, and Bob was on it too. And it's a real good game. So you should probably listen to that and then play that. You can also check out our other podcasts, including Retro Encounter. 2 weeks ago was the first part of their series on Star Ocean, The Second Story. And the next part is coming out this Thursday, so stay tuned for that. And we also have Rhythm Encounter. And last week was actually an interesting episode because it focused on the best music that has come out in the third quarter of 2025. The fact that we are in the third quarter of 2025, maybe I'm not feeling hot because of the heat. Maybe I'm just like sweating because of, oh my God, it's the third quarter of 2025. But check out that because there's some really, really great music there. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can fire us off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com if you have any ideas for future discussion questions. We didn't do a discussion question today, but maybe we'll do one next week. If you have any ideas for future episode themes, that kind of thing, fire it off. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com, but you can also find me on Blue Sky at jonologan.bluesky.social. I am not the only person on this podcast who has a social media presence. Niki, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Blue Sky as Otome Niki. That's OTOMENIKI. It's just one K because I'm Niki and that's my name, but two Ks would be a diary, and I am not one of those.
I love asking you that question. And Bob?
Bob@rpgfan.com.
Cool. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends to help us get the word out there. And you can also rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Bob, Niki, I really would like to thank you for joining us today. It's Sunday, very end of the week. You're starting a new day tomorrow. So thank you for giving me your afternoon. And that's just wonderful. Thanks.
Oh, it's so much fun to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. And everyone out there listening, thank you for listening. And whatever you're playing, have fun.